overall, can't be repeated enough that accurate and relevant data must be the first focus. You've got people that either think they know more than you or do know more than you, and they're going to want to verify everything that you share. So just always, do that double checking.
The question of today's webinar is, do you ever struggle to get data to back up your HR initiatives? Or maybe on the other hand, you actually collect the data, but you're too short-staffed in HR to analyze it. Well, today I have the perfect webinar for you. I spoke with Linda Schiaffino from Coach Business Solutions, and we'll be discussing how you can better collect and analyze data in HR. Let's get right into it. So this first slide, it's a great table that we got from the AI HR Academy. Talks a lot about data sources and kind of what those main data sources look like. Of course, we're seeing things like sales data, travel. These are all things that might not even apply to those in hourly wage industries. But Linda, just looking at this, can you describe some of those key steps in an effective data collection process for HR purposes and include those types of data that organizations should actually prioritize gathering?
So first, I want to very much encourage everyone to check into AIHR. They're a great source, and they are a great membership. They offer certifications, to expand those key contributions that our HR professionals, need to prioritize. But I think, overall, can't be repeated enough that accurate and relevant data must be the first focus. You've got people that either think they know more than you or do know more than you, and they're going to want to verify everything that you share. So just always, do that double checking. I think it's important. Let's define some objectives of the shared data. Again, verify and identify the sources. A lot of the HRIS systems that we have provide multiple avenues of reporting, capturing, surveys, benchmarks. So, to rely on that to create effective data collection. Determine what those data collection methods are. What is relevant to your industry, if you're food service or healthcare or other shift work. What is relevant that would be of importance to those other constituents, those partners that you have in your company. Again, data quality and of course, security and privacy, because you're talking about people's records, whether it's financial or personal data. You want to always make sure that you're doing your best to advocate as a gatekeeper for that information.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit about relevancy and narrowing in on those. Is there a way that industries can better narrow in on what's super relevant to them and making sure that they're not kind of getting ahead of themselves and tracking all the different types of data points?
I think a key and a repeated comment you'll hear from me today is communication. Everything that we do in HR is in service to multiple departments, whether it's leadership or our personal teams or the teams themselves. So we need to understand what they need to hear that will first get their attention, bring us in as buy-in, that seat at the table, and then come back and convert that information in terms of what is going to be the quickest path to getting them that detail.
In terms of maybe more of an all-encompassing approach, what would you consider as the most valuable data sources for HR that they should turn to first and foremost?
For your analytics, definitely your payroll records,
Okay.
The constituency, the census of the employee team, the departments that they serve, and who they report up to. Again, going back to your HRIS, I can't emphasize enough the investment in a robust HRIS is high ROI on that as well. But there are industry benchmarks for both organizations and labor pools. So identifying with those groups that focus on providing that information and making it a little bit more targeted.
Okay. And then in terms of organizations actually ensuring that they have access both internally and externally, how would you recommend doing so? Because I think that there's a bit of a disconnect with HR and actually getting that initial access to these data sources that we're even seeing on the screen.
There are costs involved because if there are any memberships of any worth, there are fees that are invested in that. SHRM comes to mind, of course, HRCI. Each one of those groups, as well as others, AIHR, offer an endless stream of certifications where an HR professional could become very proficient in targeted areas. There's a growing need, and it's being provided for data analytics, because as we possibly head into a recession, it's all about money. We're seeing tons of attrition. We're seeing layoffs. How can the financial leaders who are making those decisions not really destroy the labor pool? Because if you're losing people, that's a significant cost. So it's important to identify those memberships to organizations that are going to be of great service to you, and to make sure that they're focused either on your particular industry and identifying those benchmarks that are going to help you fine tune that information.
It's so funny that you mentioned even the economic financial aspect. We just hosted a webinar on the 2024 economic outlook for hourly wage industries. We also talked about discrepancies between industries. So how does HR data within industries like food and beverage versus healthcare vary?
I think that there's still the biggest aspect that they're still facing is the post-COVID engagement or lack thereof. We've all heard those stories of healthcare workers and food service workers that are just leaving in droves. Their employee satisfaction is at rock bottom. So that's a big obstacle for some of these companies to overcome. The analytics, the KPIs that are involved in knowing what turnover is and employee satisfaction would be good indications to decide what actions to take, how quickly to take them, to kind of stem the tide of losing team members. We've often seen people disengage much sooner than they actually physically leave their positions. How can we get in front of that and make sure that they're as happy as they could be, as much as we could provide, but kind of reduce that attrition rate that is very costly?
Wow, that's a good point. And the aspect of disengagement is something that is always obviously worked towards in terms of, making sure that employees are consistently engaged. And obviously I think that ebbs and flows, and it's really hard to actually pinpoint some data points on things like engagement, mental health, even employees' work-life balance principles, what they've got. So I think that's really important to note. In terms of tools or techniques, what do you recommend for actually consolidating and analyzing this HR data more effectively, especially for companies with very limited resources?
So the challenge is always those very limited resources.
Yeah.
And the extra efforts that HR professionals always put in. And traditionally, HR professionals don't have a strong background or a tendency towards the financial analyst side of things. But there are any number of KPIs and metrics that are really standard and kind of easy to calculate in terms of, good first stepping stones to getting that information out there. From the accounting and leadership, financial leadership side of things, we love KPIs. We love metrics. That's going to get our attention because we can tie those to the financials, and that allows us to have those tools to then speak up to leadership and really bring those partnerships to bear. I think it's important, communication, again, have some conversations with, the accounting team on whatever level. You want to bridge those reporting skill gaps to make sure that you are reporting definitely what the CFO wants to hear and will listen to. And then again, concise reporting, get to the point, make it clear, doesn't hurt to make it pretty. There's limited attention and focus paid to most HR departments. So while we have their attention, let's keep it and grab it. It does then build the relationship for the next time you want to talk to them.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Last webinar that you were on, we talked a lot about HR having a seat at the table, right? And making sure that we're speaking the language of our CEO, COO, and CFO. So completely, it just reiterates that point exactly. We talk obviously from the HCM standpoint, from the software standpoint. That's obviously where we come from workforce.com. And we have seen a lot of stories of, clients coming on and not realizing the importance of having all of their tools in terms of their technology actually being able to communicate with each other, right? So we had a story with this brewing company called Kilowatt Brewing. They've been one of our oldest clients. We've been with them forever. And they weren't actually able to manage their absenteeism very well. They weren't able to track data on this. And it was really hard because their scheduling and their time and attendance system were separate, right? They were two different systems. It was really annoying, quite frankly, for their general managers to actually be transferring over that data and to be consolidating all and sitting down and sometimes hours on end having to actually have it so they can report it to their C-suite, to their managers, to their bosses, right? So obviously integrating the two with Workforce, it was huge for them and actually having those analytics so easy to access. And again, consolidating that is so big, and making sure that, hey, this isn't going to take HR hours or maybe even a day or two to actually get this data pulled. It's going to take a couple of minutes. And that's exactly, some of the tools that we have in our tool belt with Workforce. In terms of some examples that you might have, what are some organizations that have actually successfully applied HR data to improve their practices? And what are some of those key takeaways from the experience, if you can pinpoint a couple?
So, a couple of pretty well-known names in our world do a very good job of spending that time and resources on their HR departments, on their human capital departments. And they've learned some lessons that hopefully will, trickle down to the general population. And one of them was Google. They utilize, as we might expect, HR data very extensively. They were engaging with employee service surveys. They were also utilizing their annual peer performance review feedback to understand, what's the psychology? What is the happiness level of their employees, and how would that relate to dollars and cents? And they found that higher psychological satisfaction on these employees related to safety, whether it was actually physical safety on site, those warehouse workers that are working so hard with the equipment and the machinery, to personal satisfaction and safety of their own position. And especially in light of the rampant layoffs that are going on, how safe do I feel that I'm going to keep my job? And they performed better, which is of no surprise. They encouraged their managers to be more supportive, and that resulted in higher retention and productivity. And they really trained their managers on encouraging open communication and feedback, so that cycle of information is always going and always providing that information to continually improve. IBM, they were seeing an attrition problem. Then did some surveying, and they understood that their employees were really concerned about their career development. Were there opportunities for them to grow? They understood that these employees were concerned about that and were probably looking to leave for better positions. And so they really dove into developing career paths for their employees. And especially as younger generations join the workforce, that's a focus. It should always be a focus, but it's a strong focus for them. What is my path? And what are you going to do as a company to support that path? And I'm going to stick around, and it's going to have, some really reduced turnover. They felt like they were listened to, especially from, a major corporation like IBM. And there were also targeted interventions. If they saw, specific department or an employee really in trouble, they were taking the time to dive into that and understand what was troubling that employee and how they could fix it. So that investment of time had a real strong ROI for them. And Netflix, another one on the performance review, they showed that what they had as a corporate culture was not being reflected in what they were hearing back on the performance reviews. So they moved from formal evaluations to just ongoing feedback and communication. And that significantly resulted in significant improved compensation for the employees. So nothing catches an employee's attention more than a bigger paycheck.